Good morning, everyone. Today we will start with the second chapter Making of the Constitution. Demand for the Constituent Assembly. It was in 1934 that the idea of Constituent Assembly for India was put forward for the first time by M.N. Roy, a pioneer in communist movement in India. In 1935, the Indian National Congress (INC) for the first time officially demanded a constituent assembly to frame the Constitution of India. In 1938, Jawaharlal Nehru, on behalf of the INC, declared that the Constitution of Free India must be framed without outside interference by a constituent assembly elected on the basis of adult franchise. The demand was finally accepted in the principle by British government in what is known as August Offer in 1940. In 1942, Sir Stafford Cripps, a member of cabinet, came to India with a draft proposal of British government on the framing of independent constitution to be adopted after World War II. The Cripps proposal were rejected by Muslim League, which wanted India to be divided into two autonomous states with the two separate constituent assembly. Finally, a cabinet mission was sent to India. While it rejected the idea of two constituent assemblies, it put forth the scheme of constituent assembly, which is more or less satisfied the Muslim League. Composition of Constituent Assembly. The Constituent Assembly was constituted in November 1946 under the scheme formulated by Cabinet Mission Plan. The features of scheme were: first, the total strength of Constituent Assembly was to be 389. Out of this, 296 seats were to be allotted to the British India and 93 seats to be princely state. Out of 296 allotted to British India, 292 numbers were to be drawn from the 11 governors provinces and 4 from the 4 chief commissioner provinces, 1 from each. Second, each province and the princely state or the group of states in the case of small state were to be allotted seats in the proportional to their respective population. Roughly one seat was to be allotted for every million population. Third, the seat allocated to each British province were to be divided among the three principal communities Muslim, Sikh, and General, which is all except Muslims and Sikh, in proportion to their population. Fourth, the representative of each community were to be elected by the member of that community in the provincial legislative assembly, and voting was to be by the method of proportional representation by means of single transferable vote. The representative of princely state were to be nominated by the heads of the princely state. It is thus clear that Constituent Assembly was to be a partly elected and partly nominated body. Moreover, the members were to be indirectly elected by the members of the provincial assemblies, who themselves were elected on the limited franchising. The election to the Constituent Assembly for 296 seats allotted to the British Indian province, which were held in July-August 1946. The Indian National Congress won 208 seats, the Muslim League 73 seats, and small groups and independents got the remaining 15 seats. However, the 93 seats allotted to the princely states were not filled as they decided to stay away from the Constituent Assembly. Although the Constituent Assembly was not directly elected by the people of India on the basis of adult franchise, the Assembly comprised representatives of all sections of Indian society: Hindus, Muslims, Sikh, Parsis, Anglo-Indians, Indian Christians, SCs, STs, including women of all these sections. The assembly included all important personalities of India at that time, with the exception of Mahatma Gandhi. Working of the Constituent Assembly. The Constituent Assembly held its first meeting on December 9, 1946. The Muslim League boycotted the meeting and insisted on a separate state for Pakistan. The meeting was thus attended by only 211 members. Dr. Sachidananda Sinha, the oldest member, was elected as a temporary president of the assembly, following the French practice. Later, Dr. Rajendra Prasad was elected as a president of the assembly. Similarly, both H.C. Mukherjee and V.T. Krishnamachari were elected as a vice president of the assembly. In other words, the assembly had two vice presidents. Objective resolution. On December 13, 1946, Nehru moved a historic objective resolution in the assembly. It laid down the fundamentals and philosophy of the constitutional structure. It read, first, this Constituent Assembly declares its firm and solemn resolve to proclaim India as an independent sovereign republic and to draw up for her future governance a constitution. Second, wherein the territories that now comprise British India, the territories that now from the Indian states and such other parts of India as are outside India and the states as well as the other territories as are willing to be constituted to the independent sovereign India shall be the union of all of them. Third, wherein the said territories, whether with their present boundaries or with such others as may be determined by the Constituent Assembly, and thereafter, according to the law of Constitution, shall possess the and retain the status of autonomous units together with the residuary powers and the exercise of all powers and functions of the government. The administration save and accept such powers and functions as they are vested in assigned to the union or as are inherent or implied in the union or resulting therefrom. Fourth, wherein all power and authority of the sovereign independent India, its constituent part and the organs of government are derived from the people, wherein shall be the wherein shall fifth, wherein shall be the guaranteed and secured to all the people of India justice, social, economic, and political equality of status and opportunity, and before the law, freedom of thought, expression, belief, faith, worship, vocation, association, and the action subject to the law and public morality. And sixth, wherein the adequate safeguards shall be provided for the minorities, backward and tribal areas, and depressed and other backward classes. Seventh, whereby it shall be maintained the integrity of territory of the Republic and its sovereign rights on the land, sea, and air, according to the justice and the law of civilized nations. And this ancient land attains its rightful and honored place in the world and makes its full willing contribution to the promotion of world peace and the welfare of mankind. This resolution was unanimously adopted by Assembly on January 22, 1947. It influenced the eventual shaping of the Constitution through all its subsequent stages. Its modified version forms the preamble of the Constitution. Changes by Independence Act. The representatives of the princely states who had stayed away from the Constituent Assembly gradually joined it. On April 28, 1947, representatives of 6 states were part of the assembly. After the acceptance of Mountbatten Plan on June 3, 1947, for the partition of the country, the representatives of the most of the other princely states took their seats in the assembly. The members of the Muslim League from the Indian Dominion also entered in the assembly. The Indian Independence Act of 1947 made the following 3 changes in the position of assembly. First, the assembly was made a fully sovereign body which could frame the constitution as it pleased. The act empowered the assembly to abrogate or alter any law made by the British Parliament in relation to India. Second, the assembly also became a legislative body. In other words, 2 separate functions were assigned to the assembly, that is, making of constitution for free India and enacting the ordinary law for the country. These 2 tasks were to be performed on separate days. Thus, the assembly became first parliament of the free India or Dominion legislature. Whenever the assembly met as a constituent body, it was chaired by Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and when it met as a legislative body, it was chaired by G.V. Malvankar. These 2 functions continued till November 26, 1949, when the task of making constitution was over. Third, Muslim League members hailing from the areas included the Pakistan withdrew from the Constituent Assembly or India. Consequently, the total strength of the assembly came down to the 299 and against 389 originally fixed in 1946 under the Cabinet Mission Plan. The strength of the Indian provinces, formerly British provinces, was reduced from 296 to 229 and those of the princely states from 93 to 70. The state-wise membership of the assembly as on the December 31, 1947 is shown in table 2.4 of this chapter. Other functions performed. In addition to making the constitution and enacting of the ordinary laws, Constituent Assembly also performed the following functions. It ratified the India's membership of the Commonwealth in May 1949. It adopted the national flag on June 22, 1947. It adopted the national anthem on January 24, 1950. It adopted the national song on January 24, 1950. It elected the Dr. Rajendra Prasad as first President of India on January 24, 1950. In all, the Constituent Assembly had 11 sessions over 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days. The constitution makers had gone through the constitutions of about 60 countries, and the draft constitution was to be considered for 114 days. The total expenditure incurred on making constitution amount to 64 lakh. On January 24, 1950, the Constituent Assembly held its final session. It, however, did not end and continued as a provincial Parliament of India from January 26, 1950 till the formation of new Parliament after the first general election in 1951 to 1952. Committees of the Constituent Assembly. The Constituent Assembly appointed the number of committees to deal with the different tasks of constitution making. Out of this, 8 were the major committees and others were the minor committees. The names of these committees and their chairman are given below. Major committees. First, Union Powers Committee. It was headed by Jawaharlal Nehru. Second, Union Constitution Committee, which was again headed by Jawaharlal Nehru. Third, Provincial Constitution Committee, headed by Sardar Patel. Fourth, Drafting Committee headed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Fifth, Advisory Committee on Fundamental Rights, Minorities and the Tribals and Excluded Areas, which was headed by Sardar Patel. This committee had the following 5 subcommittees. A. Fundamental Rights Subcommittee headed by J.B. Kriplani. B. Minorities Subcommittee headed by H.C. Mukherjee. C. Northeast Frontier Tribal Areas and the Assam Excluded and Partially Excluded Areas Subcommittee headed by Gopinath Bardoloi. D. Excluded and partially excluded areas other than those in the Assam Subcommittee headed by A.V. Thakkar. E. Northwest Frontier Tribal Areas Subcommittee. Sixth, the Rules of Procedure Committee headed by Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Seventh, the States Committee, that is the Committee for Negotiating with States headed by Jawaharlal Nehru. And eighth, Steering Committee, which was headed by Rajendra Prasad. Minor committees. First, Finance and Staff Committee headed by Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Second, Credentials Committee headed by Alladi Krishnaswamy Iyer. Third, House Committee headed by B. Pattadhi Sitaramaiah. Fourth, Order of Business Committee headed by Dr. K. M. Munshi. Fifth, Ad hoc Committee on the National Flag headed by Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Sixth, the Committee on Functions of the Constituent Assembly headed by G. V. Malvankar. Seventh, Ad hoc Committee on the Supreme Court headed by S. Varadachari, not an Constituent Assembly member. Eighth, the Committee on the Chief Commissioners Provinces headed by B. Pattabhi Sitaramaiah. Ninth, the Experts Committee on Financial Provisions of the Union Constitution headed by Nalini Ranjan Sarkar, who is also not an assembly member. 10th, Linguistic Provincial Committee headed by S. K. Dhar, who was not an assembly member. Special Committee to examine the draft constitution headed by Jawaharlal Nehru. 12th, Press Gallery Committee headed by Usha Nath Sen. And 13th, the Ad hoc Committee on the Citizenship held by S. Varadachari, who was not the assembly member. Drafting Committee. Among the all committees of Constituent Assembly, the most important committee was the Drafting Committee set up on the August 29, 1947. It was this committee that was entrusted with the task of preparing a draft for new constitution. It consisted of the 7 members, and they were: first, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who was the chairman of this committee. Second, N. Gopalswamy Iyengar. Third, Alladi Krishnaswamy Iyer. Fourth, Dr. K. M. Munshi. Fifth, Sayyid Muhammad Sadadullah. Sixth, N. Madhva Rao. He was replaced by B. L. Mittar, who resigned due to his ill health. And seventh, T. T. Krishnamachari. He replaced D. P. Khaitan, who died in 1948. The drafting committee, after taking into the consideration the proposals of various committees, prepared the first draft of Constitution of India, which was published in February 1948. The people of India were given 8 months to discuss the draft and propose amendments in the light of public comments, criticisms and suggestions. The drafting committee prepared the second draft, which was published in October 1948. The drafting committee took less than 6 months to prepare its draft. In all, it sat only for 141 days. Enactment of the Constitution. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar introduced the final draft of the Constitution in the Assembly on November 4, 1948. for the first reading. The Assembly had general discussion on it for the 5 days till November 9, 1948. The second reading, clause by clause consideration, started on the November 15, 1948 and ended on the October 17, 1949. During this stage, as many as 7,653 amendments were proposed and 2,473 were actually discussed in the Assembly. The third reading of the draft started on November 14, 1949. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar moved a motion, the Constitution as settled by the Assembly, to be passed. The motion on the draft Constitution was declared as passed on November 26, 1949 and received the declared as passed on November 26, 1949 and received the signature of the members and the President. Out of the total 299 members of the Assembly, only 284 were actually present on that day and signed the Constitution. This is also the date mentioned by the preamble as the date on which the people of India in Constituent Assembly enacted and gave to themselves this Constitution. The Constitution adopted on November 26, 1949 contained a preamble, 395 articles and 8 schedules. The preamble was enacted after the entire Constitution was already enacted. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the then law minister, piloted the draft Constitution in the Assembly. He took a very prominent part in deliberations of the Assembly. He was known for his logical, forceful, and persuasive arguments on the floor of the Assembly. He is recognized as the father of Constitution of India. This brilliant writer, constitutional expert, undisputed leader of scheduled caste, and the chief architect of the Constitution of India is also known as Modern Manu. Enforcement of the Constitution. Some provisions of the Constitution pertaining to the citizenships, elections, provincial parliament, temporary and transitional provisions, and the short title contained in Article 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 60, 324, 366, 367, 379, 380, 388, 391, 392, and 393 came into force on November 26, 1949 itself. The remaining provisions, which are the major part of the Constitution, came into force on January 26, 1950. This day is referred to in the Constitution as the date of its commencement and celebrated as a Republic Day. The 26th January was specifically chosen as the date of commencement of the Constitution because of its historical importance. It was on this day, in 1930, the Purna Swaraj Day was celebrated, following the resolution of the Lahore session in December 29 of the INC. With the commencement of the Constitution, Indian Independence Act of 1947 and the Government of India Act of 1935, with the all enactments amending and or supplementing the latter act, were repealed. The abolition of Privy Council, Jurisdiction Council, and 1949 was, however, continued. The Experts Committee of the Congress. While elections to the Constituent Assembly were still in progress, on July 8, 1946, the party Indian National Congress appointed an experts committee for the purpose of preparing material for the Constituent Assembly. This committee consisted of the following members: Jawaharlal Nehru, who was the chairman, M. Asaf Ali, K. M. Munshi, N. Gopalswamy Iyengar, K. T. Shah, D. R. Gadgil, Humayun Kumar, K. Santhana. Later, on the chairman's proposal, it was resolved that Krishna Kripalani to be co-opted as member and convener of the committee. The committee had two sittings, first at New Delhi from July 20 to 22 in 1946 and the second at Bombay from August 15 to 17, 1946. Apart from the number of notes prepared by its members, the committee discussed the procedure to be adopted by the Constituent Assembly. The question of the appointment of the various committees and the draft of resolution on the objectives of the Constitution to be moved during the first session of the Constituent Assembly. On the role played by this committee in making of the Constitution, Granville Austin, the British constitutional expert, observed, "It was the Congress Experts Committee that set India on the road of her present constitution." The committee members, working with the framework of Cabinet Mission Scheme, made general suggestions about autonomous areas, the powers of provincial governments and the centres, and about such issues of the princely state and amending power. They are also drafted a resolution closely resembling to the objective resolution. Criticism of the Constituent Assembly. The critics have criticized the Constituent Assembly on the various grounds, and these are as follows. First, it was not a representative body. The critics have argued that the Constituent Assembly was not the representative body as its members were not directly elected by the people of India on the basis of universal adult franchise. Second, it was not a sovereign body. The critics maintained that the Constituent Assembly was not a sovereign body as it was created by the purposes of British government. Further, they said that the assembly held its sessions with the permission of the British government. Third, time consuming. According to the critics, the Constituent Assembly took unduly long time to make the constitution and took only 4 months they stated that the framers of American Constitution took only 4 months to complete their work. In this context, the Naziruddin Ahmad, a member of Constituent Assembly, coined a new name for the drafting committee to show his contempt for it. He called it as the drifting committee. Fourth, dominated by Congress. The critics charged that the Constituent Assembly was dominated by the Congress Party. Granville Austin, an American constitutional expert, remarked the Constituent Assembly was one-party body in the essentially one-party country. The Assembly was the Congress and the Congress was India. Fifth, lawyer-politician domination. It was also maintained by the critics that the Constituent Assembly was dominated by the lawyers and politicians. They pointed out the other sections of the society were not sufficiently represented. This, to them, is the main reason for the bulkiness and complicated language of the Constitution. Sixth, dominated by Hindus. According to some critics, the Constituent Assembly was the Hindu-dominated body. Lord Viscount Simon called it the body of Hindus. Similarly, Winston Churchill commented that the Constituent Assembly represented only one major community in India. Important facts. First, elephant was adopted as a symbol, that is seal of the Constituent Assembly. Sir B.N. Rao was appointed as the constitutional advisor or legal advisor to the Constitutional Assembly. Third, H.V.R. Iyengar was the secretary to the Constituent Assembly. Fourth, S.N. Mukherjee was the chief draftsman of the Constitution in the Constituent Assembly. Fifth, Prem Bihari Narayan Rai Zada was the calligrapher of Indian Constitution. The original Constitution was handwritten by him in the flowing italic style. Sixth, the original version was beautified and decorated by the artists from Shantiniketan, including Nandlal Bose, Biohar Ram Manohar Sinha. Seventh, Biohar Ram Manohar Sinha illuminated, beautified, and ornamented the original preamble, calligraphed by the Prem Bihari Narayan Rai Sada. The calligraphy of the Hindi version of the original constitution was done by Vasant Krishna Vaidya and elegantly decorated and illuminated by Nandlal Bose. Hindi text of the Constitution. Originally, the Constitution of India did not make any provisions with respect to the authoritative text of the Constitution in Hindi language. Later, the provisions in this regard made by 58th Constitution Amendment Act of 1987. This amendment inserted a new article 394A in the part of Constitution, that is part 22. This article contains following provision. First, the President shall cause to be published under his authority the translation of Constitution in Hindi language, the modification which are necessary to bring it in the conformity with the language, style and terminology adopted in the authoritative text of central acts in Hindi can be made in it. All the amendments of the Constitution made before such a publication should be incorporated in it, and the translation of Hindi of every amendment of the Constitution made in English. Second, the translation of Constitution and its every amendment published shall be constructed to have same meaning as the original text in the English. If any difficulty arises in this matter, the President shall cause the Hindi text to be revised suitably. Third, the translation of Constitution and its every amendment published shall be deemed to be for all purpose its authoritative text in Hindi. Table 2.1 Allocation of seats in the Constituent Assembly of India in 1946. British Indian provinces, 11 in numbers, got 292 seats. Princely states, which are Indian states, got 93 seats, and Chief Commissioner province, which are 4 in number, got 4 seats. Therefore, total 389 seats. Results of the election to the Constituent Assembly in July-August 1946. Congress won 208 seats. Muslim League won 73 seats. Then Unionist Party, Unionist Scheduled Class, Krishak Praja Party, Scheduled Caste Federation, Sikh Non-Congress, Communist Party, all won one seat each, and last independents won 8 seats, total 296 seats. Community-wise representation in the Constituent Assembly in 1946. Hindus were 163 in number, Muslims 80, Scheduled Caste 31, Indian Christians 6, Backward Tribes 6, Sikh 4, Anglo-Indians 3, Parsis 3, total 296. The state-wise membership of the Constituent Assembly of India as on December 31, 1947. A. The Indian provinces 229, Madras 49 members, Bombay 21 members, West Bengal 19 members, United Provinces 55 members, East Punjab 12 members, Bihar 36 members, CP and Berar 17 members, Assam 8 members, Odisha, Delhi, Ajmer Merwara and Kurg each 1 member. B. Indian states, the princely states, total 70 in numbers. Alwar 1 in number, Baroda 3, Bhopal, Bikaner, Cochin each 1, Gwalior 4, Indore 1, Jaipur 3, Jodhpur 2, Kolhapur, Kota and Mayurbhanj 1, Mysore 7, Patiala 2, Rewa 2, Travancore 6, Udaipur 2, Sikkim and Kunj Bihar Group 1, Tripura, Manipur and Khasi State Group 1, UP States Group 1, Eastern Rajputana States Group 3, Central India States Group including Bundelkhand and Malwa 3, Western India States Group 4, Gujarat States Group 2, Deccan and Madras States Group 2, Punjab States Group 3, Eastern States Group 1, 4, Eastern States Group 2, 3, Residuary States Group 4, total 299. The sessions of Constituent Assembly at glance. First session held between 9 to 23 December 1946. Second session on 20 to 25 January 1947. Third session on April 28 to May 2, 1947. Fourth session in July 14 to 31 in 1947. Fifth session August 14 to 30 in 1947. Sixth session January 27, 1948. Seventh session November 4, 1948 to January 8, 1949. Eighth session May 16 to June 16, 1949. Ninth session July 30 to September 18, 1949. 10th session October 6 to 17, 1949, and the 11th and final session in November 14 to 26 in 1949. Note, the assembly met once again on January 24, 1950 when the members appended their signatures to the Constitution of India. Thank you. Now we are completed with the chapter number 2. In next part we will see the third chapter, Salient Features of the Constitution. Thank you. Have a good day, and if you like this audiobook, please do not forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel UPSC Shorts. Thank you once again.